The night my boss fired me didn't begin with a screaming argument. It began with a quiet email. Just 3 lines. 3 sentences that would eventually cost him his entire company. But at the time, it felt like the end of my career. My name is Ethan Carter. For 13 years, I worked at a cybersecurity company in San Francisco called Helix Guard Systems. If you've ever heard about the massive cyberattacks that shut down hospitals, banks, and shipping networks, you probably understand why companies like ours exist. We built the digital shields that protected corporations from those disasters. And for most of those 13 years, I was the one designing those shields. Not the CEO, not the executives. Me. But the people at the top never really noticed that, until the night everything collapsed. The email arrived at 7:12 p.m. on a Thursday. Subject line: Immediate organizational restructuring. I almost ignored it. Corporate restructuring emails happen all the time. Departments shift, titles change, some teams merge. But something about the sender caught my attention. It came directly from Ryan Holloway, our new CEO. Ryan had joined Helix Guard 6 months earlier, after a venture capital group acquired majority ownership of the company. He was young, ambitious, and obsessed with something he called AI-driven automation. According to Ryan, humans were inefficient, too emotional, too expensive. His solution: replace as many human decisions as possible with algorithms, which might have worked for marketing analytics. But cybersecurity isn't marketing. Cybersecurity is war. And wars aren't won by dashboards. They're won by experience. Still, Ryan didn't care about that. He cared about scaling the company fast enough to triple its valuation before the next funding round, which meant cutting costs. And the biggest cost in tech companies is always the same: people. I opened the email. 3 sentences. That was all. Effective immediately, Helix Guard Systems is transitioning to an AI-managed security architecture. All manual security operations will be discontinued. Your position is no longer required. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. Helix Guard's entire infrastructure had been built around one central defense system. A system I had designed. A system only 3 people fully understood. And 2 of those people had already left the company last year. Which meant the person Ryan had just fired was the only one who knew how the system actually worked. The meeting. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Caller ID. Ryan Holloway, I answered. Ethan, he said confidently. I assume you saw the email. I did. He sounded pleased with himself. This isn't personal. We're moving toward a fully automated threat management model. I leaned back in my chair. You're replacing the entire security team with AI. Yes. You realize the system you're replacing was written manually. Exactly. That's the problem. I almost laughed again. Ryan continued. We've hired a new consulting firm to deploy an advanced AI security platform. What firm? Synapse Defense. I closed my eyes. Synapse Defense was a flashy startup that sold automated cybersecurity tools to companies that didn't understand cybersecurity. Real security professionals avoided them like a disease. Their software looked impressive in demos, but it failed under real attacks. Ryan, I said slowly, you're making a mistake. He chuckled lightly. Technology evolves, Ethan. Yes, I said, but attackers evolve faster. Ryan ignored that. Your final paycheck will be processed tomorrow. Then he hung up. Just like that. 13 years of work ended in a 2-minute phone call. The call. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen made my stomach tighten. David Rosen, CEO of Mercury National Bank, one of HelixGuard's biggest clients. Our company protected the digital infrastructure for nearly half of their online banking systems. David never called engineers directly. He only called executives, unless something was very wrong. I answered. "Ethan." His voice sounded tense. "Did something happen at HelixGuard today?" I hesitated. "Yes." "What kind of restructuring?" "They fired the entire manual security division." Silence. Then David said something that made my chest tighten. "You realize our contract requires human-managed threat monitoring." "I know. And the system protecting our network," I finished the sentence, "was built by me." Another pause. Then David said quietly, "Should I be worried?" I looked out the window at the San Francisco skyline. Yes. Very worried. The attack 3 weeks later, the first breach happened. Not at Mercury Bank. At a pharmaceutical company in Boston. HelixGuard had just migrated them to the new AI defense system. At 2:13 a.m., their servers were hit by a coordinated ransomware attack. The AI detected the intrusion, but it didn't understand it, because the attack didn't match any pattern in its database. So the system classified it as low priority. By the time human engineers noticed something was wrong, the attackers had already encrypted every server. Damages, $180 million. The news spread quickly through the cybersecurity world, but Ryan dismissed it publicly. A minor transition issue. Then the second breach happened. A hospital network in Texas. This time the attack shut down patient record systems for 14 hours. Doctors had to delay surgeries. That story made national news. Still, Ryan refused to admit the problem. Instead, he doubled down. HelixGuard announced they would fully eliminate manual security monitoring, which was when my phone started ringing again. Clients, one after another. They all asked the same question. "Are you still with HelixGuard?" And every time I answered, "No." The offer. 2 months after I was fired, I received a call from someone unexpected. Laura Bennett, CEO of Sentinel Core Security, one of HelixGuard's biggest competitors. "I've been watching the situation," she said. "You mean the disasters?" "Yes." She paused. "I want you to build something." "What?" "A security division that actually works." I leaned back in my chair. "And why me?" Laura laughed softly. "Because half of HelixGuard's clients trust you more than they trust their own IT departments." She wasn't wrong. Many of those partnerships existed because I had personally designed their defense systems. And in cybersecurity, trust matters more than marketing. Laura continued. "I want you to run the entire division." I thought about Ryan Holloway, about the email, about the phone call. Then I smiled slightly. "When do I start?" 3 months later. The first contract arrived from Mercury National Bank. They terminated their HelixGuard agreement, $600 million. Then 3 more companies followed, then 8. Within 6 months, HelixGuard lost $4.7 billion in contracts. All of them moved to Sentinel Core. All of them signed the agreements with one condition. Ethan Carter oversees the security architecture. Meanwhile, Ryan Holloway gave interviews insisting everything was under control. But investors weren't convinced. HelixGuard's stock dropped 48%. Then came the final blow, the largest cyber attack in the company's history. A coordinated breach across 3 major corporate clients. Total damage, $1.3 billion. The investigation revealed something terrifying. The attackers had exploited a vulnerability inside the AI defense platform. A vulnerability every experienced security engineer would have spotted immediately. But there were no engineers left, only algorithms. 2 weeks later, Ryan Holloway resigned. The official statement said he was leaving to pursue other opportunities. But everyone in the cybersecurity world knew the truth. He hadn't just fired an employee. He had removed the only person holding his company's security system together. And the moment he did, everything collapsed. 3 months after I joined Sentinel Corps, the industry had already started shifting, not dramatically, not publicly, but quietly. Cybersecurity is a small world. Executives attend the same conferences. CTOs sit on the same advisory boards. Security directors talk to each other more often than companies realize, which meant something else was spreading faster than the news articles. A question. A very simple one. Why did Helix Guard suddenly lose their best engineer? And once people started asking that question, they started asking a second one. If Ethan Carter isn't protecting our systems anymore, who is? The first contract termination didn't come from a bank. It came from a shipping company, Atlantic Freight Lines. They operated one of the largest cargo networks on the East Coast, thousands of trucks, hundreds of distribution centers. Their logistics software ran 24 hours a day, and if that system went down, ports would stop moving. The call came late one afternoon. "Ethan," the voice said. I recognized it immediately. Mark Caldwell, their director of infrastructure. We'd worked together for nearly 7 years. "Mark, I just heard something," he said. "About Helix Guard?" "Yes. They replaced their entire manual defense team." He exhaled slowly. "That includes you?" "Yes." There was a long pause. Then he asked the question every client eventually asked. "If an attack hits our system tonight, who handles it?" I didn't answer right away, because we both already knew the answer. "An AI program," I finally said. Mark laughed once, not because it was funny, because it was terrifying. 2 weeks later, Atlantic Freight terminated their contract, $220 million, and signed with Sentinel Corps. After Atlantic Freight moved, something interesting started happening. Other companies didn't immediately leave Helix Guard, but they started asking questions. Lots of questions. They asked about the AI system, about the engineers who used to monitor their networks, about the security architecture that had protected them for years. Helix Guard's sales team responded with polished presentations, PowerPoint slides, technical buzzwords, predictive threat modeling, autonomous cyber defense. But experienced IT directors saw something those presentations couldn't hide. The people were gone. And cybersecurity without people is like a hospital without doctors. Eventually, the second domino fell, then the third, then the fourth. Within a month, 4 major contracts had moved to Sentinel Corps, each one worth hundreds of millions. And every time a company switched, the reason listed in their termination letter was almost identical: loss of trusted operational leadership. That phrase started appearing everywhere: industry forums, internal reports, even investor briefings. Ryan Holloway tried to dismiss it publicly, but privately, Helix Guard's leadership was starting to panic. 6 months after my firing, Helix Guard's board called an emergency meeting. Ryan Holloway stood at the head of the table inside their San Francisco headquarters. Across from him sat 12 investors, some of the same people who had funded the company's expansion. On the screen behind him glowed a chart. Revenue losses, quarter after quarter. The decline was obvious. One of the investors spoke first. "How many contracts have we lost?" Ryan kept his voice calm. 7. "And their value?" Ryan hesitated. "Approximately $2.3 billion. The room went silent. Another board member leaned forward. "Why?" Ryan clicked the remote. A new slide appeared. Market transition to AI security systems. He explained how the company was evolving, How automation would eventually dominate cybersecurity. How temporary losses were expected during technological transformation. Most of the board members didn't look convinced. Finally, one of them asked the question Ryan had been avoiding for months. "Where is Ethan Carter?" Ryan's jaw tightened slightly. "He's working for a competitor." "And the client's leaving us." The investor paused. "Are they following him?" Ryan didn't answer, because the answer was obvious. 7 months after I left HelixGuard, the biggest attack happened. Not a ransomware incident, not a simple network intrusion. This one was different. It targeted a financial transaction clearing network used by multiple regional banks. HelixGuard was responsible for protecting that system. At 3:47 a.m., attackers entered through a vulnerability hidden inside the AI defense platform. The system detected unusual activity, but again, it didn't recognize the pattern. So it categorized the activity as low-risk system anomaly. For the next 46 minutes, the attackers moved freely across the network. By the time human engineers realized something was wrong, $180 million in fraudulent transactions had already been initiated. Banks shut down transfers across the network. Financial markets noticed immediately. News outlets began reporting a massive cybersecurity failure, and for the first time, HelixGuard's name appeared in headlines. That morning, Laura Bennett walked into my office. She placed a tablet on the desk. "Turn on CNBC," she said. The headline filled the screen. "Major cyber breach hits regional bank network." The anchor continued speaking. "Security analysts believe the attack may be linked to automated defense systems that failed to detect the intrusion." Laura looked at me. "That system?" "Yes." "HelixGuard?" "Yes." She sat down slowly. "Do you realize what this means?" "Yes." Because I did. Every company still using HelixGuard's platform would now be asking the same terrifying question. If their system failed once, could it fail again? The first call came from a healthcare network in Chicago, then a telecommunications company in Dallas, then an insurance provider in New York. Every conversation sounded similar. "Ethan, we need to talk." Some of those companies had worked with me for nearly a decade. They didn't trust the system anymore. They trusted the person who had originally built their defenses. By the end of that week, Sentinel Corps signed 11 new contracts, total value $3.9 billion. HelixGuard stock dropped another 30%. Investors demanded answers. But the most painful realization inside HelixGuard's leadership wasn't the financial loss. It was something far worse. The clients weren't leaving because of one breach. They were leaving because the person they trusted had already left months earlier. 9 months after my firing, I received a message from someone unexpected. The subject line read, "Private Security Summit, Washington, D.C." It was an invitation to speak at one of the largest cybersecurity conferences in the United States. Government agencies, military contractors, technology companies. Everyone who mattered in digital security would be there. And according to the agenda, one of the keynote speakers would also be attending, Ryan Holloway. For the first time since he fired me, we would be in the same room again. By that point, the entire industry already knew something Ryan still refused to admit. HelixGuard hadn't lost contracts because of technology. They lost them because of a single decision made in a 3-sentence email. The moment a CEO believed an algorithm could replace experience, and the moment he removed the person holding his company's entire security reputation together. The conference took place in Washington, D.C. Not in a flashy hotel ballroom like most tech events. This one was held inside a quiet government convention center just a few blocks from the Capitol. Cybersecurity conferences are different from regular tech gatherings. There are fewer marketing booths, fewer flashy presentations, and a lot more people who look like they haven't slept properly in weeks. Because most of them haven't. When your job is defending national infrastructure from cyberattacks, sleep tends to become optional. I arrived early that morning. The lobby was already crowded with security directors, government analysts, and engineers from some of the largest tech companies in the country. Everyone had heard about the Helix Guard breach. Everyone had an opinion, and everyone knew the two names connected to that story, Ryan Holloway and me. My keynote presentation was scheduled for the afternoon. Ryan's presentation was scheduled 2 hours earlier. His topic appeared on the event program. The future of AI-driven cybersecurity. I almost laughed when I saw it, because by that point, most of the industry had already begun questioning that exact idea. But Ryan had always been confident, even when confidence wasn't justified. The main auditorium seated nearly 1,000 people. Security professionals filled the rows, laptops open, phones recording. Ryan stepped onto the stage with the same confident posture I remembered. Dark suit, perfectly rehearsed smile. Behind him, a giant screen displayed the Helix Guard logo. He began speaking about automation, about artificial intelligence transforming cybersecurity, about eliminating human error from security systems. For the first 10 minutes, the audience listened politely. But something felt different. The energy in the room wasn't excitement. It was skepticism. Then the questions started. A security director from a financial firm stood up first. Your AI defense platform failed during the recent clearing network breach. Can you explain why? Ryan answered smoothly. No system is perfect during its early deployment phase. Another hand went up. A government analyst this time. How many manual security engineers currently monitor Helix Guard's platform? Ryan hesitated for half a second. Our system is designed to operate autonomously. A quiet murmur spread across the auditorium. Then someone asked the question everyone had been waiting for. Where is Ethan Carter? The room went silent. Ryan smiled politely. Mr. Carter is no longer with the company. That answer should have ended the discussion, but it didn't, because a man in the second row stood up. David Rosen, CEO of Mercury National Bank, the same bank that had been Helix Guard's largest client. David spoke calmly. For 12 years, our bank trusted Helix Guard's security infrastructure. He paused. And that infrastructure was designed and monitored by Ethan Carter. Ryan remained composed. Our new system improves upon... David interrupted him. My question is simple. The room felt completely still now. Why did you remove the person responsible for protecting your client's networks? Ryan didn't respond immediately, because there wasn't a good answer. After the presentation ended, the lobby filled with quiet conversations. Small groups formed everywhere. People discussing the breach, the AI platform, Helix Guard's future. And more than once, I heard my name. I stepped outside to get some air. The autumn wind moved through the streets of Washington. For a moment, the noise of the conference faded behind me. Then a voice spoke from behind. Ethan! I turned. Ryan Holloway stood a few feet away. It was the first time we had seen each other since the night he fired me. He looked tired, more tired than I remembered. The confidence was still there, but something else had appeared behind it. Pressure, a lot of pressure. He studied me for a moment. So you're enjoying the chaos? I shook my head. I didn't create it. Ryan folded his arms. You've been recruiting our clients. They called me. Of course they did. There was a long pause between us. Then Ryan said something interesting. "You could have stayed." I raised an eyebrow. "You fired me." "You could have fought it." I laughed softly. "You replaced an entire security team with an algorithm." Ryan looked away toward the street. "The industry is changing." "Yes," I said. "It always does." He turned back toward me. "But the company's leaving us. They trust you." I shrugged. "Trust takes time." Ryan didn't respond, because deep down, he already understood something important. Trust can take years to build, but it can disappear in a single decision. 2 hours later, I walked onto the same stage Ryan had stood on earlier. The auditorium was full again. This time, the presentation slide behind me showed a much simpler title: Why Cybersecurity Still Needs Humans. I didn't use flashy graphics, no dramatic marketing videos, just real examples, real attacks, real stories about how experienced engineers stopped threats that automated systems failed to recognize. Halfway through the presentation, I mentioned something everyone in the room already understood. Technology is powerful, I said, but attackers are human. I paused. And humans don't behave like predictable algorithms. The audience nodded. Most of them had seen exactly that problem in real life. Then I added one final point. The strongest security systems in the world aren't built by software alone. They're built by people who understand how attackers think. The room stayed quiet for a moment. Then the applause started. That evening, the conference hosted a private dinner for executives and speakers. Only a few hundred people attended. Bank CEOs, defense contractors, technology leaders. During the dinner, Laura Bennett stood up to make an announcement. Sentinel Core Security is expanding its National Defense Division. She glanced toward me. And Ethan Carter will be leading the new architecture program. Several people around the room nodded approvingly. Because by that point, the industry had already chosen sides. Helix Guard's future looked uncertain. Sentinel Core's future looked very different. 2 weeks after the conference, the final crisis hit Helix Guard. Another breach. But this one was much worse. A coordinated attack targeting 3 corporate networks at the same time. The AI defense system detected unusual activity, but it couldn't understand the pattern. Because the attackers had designed the intrusion specifically to confuse automated detection for 2 hours. The attackers moved freely across the networks, stealing data, installing backdoors, destroying servers. By the time Helix Guard's engineers realized what was happening, the damage was catastrophic. Financial loss estimates reached $900 million. News outlets called it one of the largest cybersecurity failures in recent corporate history. Investors reacted immediately. Helix Guard stock dropped another 35%. The board scheduled an emergency meeting. And this time, Ryan Holloway wasn't the one calling it. The emergency board meeting at Helix Guard happened on a Monday morning. No press, no announcements. Just 12 investors sitting around a long glass table inside the company's San Francisco headquarters. Outside the windows, the city looked exactly the same as it always had. Traffic moving across the Bay Bridge, office workers walking between buildings, coffee shops opening for the morning rush. But inside Helix Guard's headquarters, everything felt different. Because by that point, the numbers were impossible to ignore. Contracts lost, stock price collapsing, clients leaving one after another, and the latest cyber attack had finally pushed the company to the edge. Ryan Holloway sat at the end of the table. Across from him, the board members reviewed the latest financial reports. No one spoke for several minutes. Finally, one of the investors closed the report folder. Total damages from the last breach? The CFO answered quietly. Approximately $900 million. Another board member leaned back in his chair. And client losses this year? The CFO didn't look up from the numbers. 4.8 billion. The room went silent again. For the first time since Ryan had joined the company, the investors weren't listening to presentations anymore. They were looking for accountability, and everyone in the room already knew where that accountability would land. One of the senior investors finally turned toward Ryan. "When you replaced the security division..." He paused. "Did anyone advise against it?" Ryan hesitated, because the answer was obvious. "Yes." "And who was that?" Ryan didn't answer immediately, but the entire board already knew the name. Ethan Carter, the engineer who had built the company's entire defensive architecture, the person who understood their systems better than anyone else. The person Ryan had fired in a 3-sentence email. The investor sighed slowly. "You removed the only person capable of protecting the infrastructure." Ryan tried to defend the decision. "We were transitioning to an automated model." Another board member interrupted him. "You replaced experienced engineers with an algorithm." Ryan fell silent, because there was nothing left to argue. The evidence was already written in the company's financial reports. Billions of dollars in lost contracts, investors leaving, clients moving their security operations elsewhere, and worst of all, many of those clients were now working with Sentinel Corp, the company where Ethan Carter now worked. The board meeting lasted another hour. Lawyers reviewed liability risks. Financial analysts discussed restructuring options. Some investors suggested selling parts of the company before things got worse. Others believed HelixGuard might still recover. But one fact remained clear. The current leadership had lost the trust of the industry. Eventually, the chairman of the board spoke. "We need to restore confidence." He looked directly at Ryan. "And that requires a change." Ryan didn't ask what that meant. He already knew. 2 days later, the internal memo was sent to every employee. Ryan Holloway had resigned as CEO of HelixGuard Systems. The statement described it as a mutual decision. But everyone inside the cybersecurity industry understood what had really happened. The board had removed him, quietly, without interviews, without explanations, because the company was already dealing with enough damage. 3 months later, HelixGuard was still trying to recover. The company hired new engineers. They rebuilt parts of their security architecture. They even brought back some manual monitoring systems. But something important had already changed. The reputation was gone. In cybersecurity, reputation is everything. Once clients believe a company cannot protect their data, they rarely return. Meanwhile, Sentinel Corp continued growing. New contracts, new infrastructure projects, government partnerships. And for the first time in my career, I wasn't just designing systems. I was leading them. Almost a year after everything happened, I attended another cybersecurity conference. This one was smaller, more technical. Engineers sharing research instead of executives making sales presentations. During a break between sessions, someone approached me in the lobby. I recognized him immediately. Ryan Holloway. He looked different, not defeated, just quieter, more reflective. He stopped a few feet away. "Ethan." "Ryan." For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he spoke. "You were right." I raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "People." He looked around the conference hall. "Cybersecurity isn't just technology." "No," I said. "It never was." Ryan nodded slowly. "I thought automation could replace experience." I didn't respond, because some lessons don't need commentary. Ryan sighed. "You know what the board asked me before I left?" "What?" He gave a small, tired smile. "They asked why every client leaving HelixGuard kept mentioning the same name." He paused. Yours. I shrugged. Trust travels. Ryan nodded once. Yes. Then he extended his hand. For a moment, I considered it. Then I shook it. Not because the past had been forgotten, but because the lesson had already been learned. When Ryan fired me, he believed he had removed an employee. What he actually removed was something much more important. The person holding together years of relationships, years of trust, years of experience that no algorithm could replicate. Technology changes constantly. Software evolves. Companies rise and fall. But one thing in business has remained the same for centuries. People trust people. And the moment a company forgets that, the system doesn't fail immediately. The relationship simply moves somewhere else.